Good afternoon, evening, or morning, all. My name is Dave, and welcome to Stable Stories. Stable Stories is a podcast featuring the builders, pioneers, and operators in the stablecoin space. Today, we have Chase Merlin. He is the head of product at Brale. And Brale is a stablecoin issuance platform offering a full suite of products that lets you ship, deploy, and use your stablecoin, grow a community and a network of users seamlessly. Hey, Chase, how's it going, man?
Hey Dave, how's it going? Yeah, great to be here.
Good, good. Nice. Welcome. Let's jump right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey into crypto, how you got involved, and how you came to Braille.
Yeah, for sure. So my background, I previously had built some behavioral health tech businesses in Nashville and sort of like, Web 2 kind of tech background, and then got into growth product at Fetch Rewards. I think I was, later to crypto around like 2020, really like DeFi Summer kind of times where I got to the point where I just couldn't think about anything else really, and started diving in, like spending more time with the actual protocols on chain, a lot of time in like DAOs kind of in that time period. And that was the era where there were a lot of stablecoin failures, really, obviously Luna, but a lot of others at the time. And so coming out of that cycle, I started thinking a lot more seriously about stablecoins as like the fundamental primitive, really, of all these on-chain use cases. And then kind of randomly I got connected with Ben, who had previously built Dwala, and kind of the team there had all of this expertise around this fintech expertise, building regulated fintech businesses. I got linked up with Brale around, I think it was beginning of 2022. And then since then I've had the opportunity kind of just to see, what's happened in stable coins, a lot more legitimacy, volume growth. And it's just been really awesome to, build out the product and the team at Brale.
Nice. First time using a stablecoin. You remember what it was?
Or I'm sure it was probably trading related in
Yeah.
like 2020 or kind of like yield farming days. It feels like a long time ago.
Yeah. That is the typical answer. Every now and again, you get an outlier or something really out there, but that tends to be how most people come to stablecoins. Awesome. And tell me a little bit about Braille and what you guys are building.
Yeah, for sure. So we make it easy for businesses and communities to issue their own and then have a unified API for converting between dollars and stables. And so, these days, really, as all of these business models move on chain, I think we've seen a lot from payments. We just look at things like, marketplaces, games, consumer applications, banks, as all of these move on chain. Our goal is really to provide a unified API for all the management that you would need, to run your business entirely on chain. So we'd started really with issuance, really with this vision that it should be very easy for any business model to issue their own stablecoin, to capture treasury revenue, to have more control, right, to brand the stablecoin yourself. That's sort of like the Brale issuance platform. And since then, we've, built a lot of products around that in terms of on and off ramps, adding more blockchains, custodial wallets. Really, the goal is to make it easy to manage your entire flow, right, in the form of your own stablecoin, which becomes a revenue source for your business.
Awesome. I know one thing I noticed diving into Braille is, there's a lot of stablecoin issuance platforms, but you seem to be going full stack in the product suite of stablecoin related products in Web3. Wondering if you could walk through some of the friction points that people encounter, when they launch a stablecoin, and how the products that you're building help to spur the growth of the project, make it easier on the founder, the builder, when they're thinking about how to grow their projects out.
Yeah. So I think these days it's quite common for a lot of these models to want to roll their own stablecoin. Like, it's pretty well understood. Whereas a few years in the past, we'd sort of like tell people about their own stable, and it was a harder pitch. People hadn't wrapped their mind around it. I think these days everyone certainly wants treasury revenue. They want to be more part of issuance. I think where we've gone though is more, if you look at most business models, right, of course, like outside of kind of crypto natives, right, so the 99%, everything starts with obviously getting fiat like into the system. And so this is where we focused a lot on different on and off ramp methods. And so one I did call out would be like automations, so virtual accounts. So we've really built, I think, this really nice binding between basically virtual accounts and wallets. So it makes it very easy just to push payments like wire ACH. So if I'm a fintech, right, it makes it very easy for me to set up all these virtual accounts for my counterparties to get the money pitching into my model immediately in the form of my own stablecoin and start earning treasury revenue. Another example on the ramp side would be debits. And so really excited about the flow we have with Plaid, and also the ability to do bank transfers immediately into a stablecoin. And so if you think about a typical fintech, right, experience, right, like your Venmo type experience, we've really followed that. And now it's very easy for any user, right, that's used to this Plaid flow, used to this typical fintech flow to to get money into the application. And so it's more where like the developers should really think of their own stablecoin as just the same as sort of like any other token. It should be very easy to use with this wide tool set. I think that's where issuance will really succeed and flourish. It's more of like a benefit on top of sort of the traditional stablecoin stack.
Definitely. And let's zoom back just a little bit and start from sort of the first big question is why would a project or a protocol want to launch its own stablecoin? Might be self-evident to us, but for those who are still wondering, why not just use USDC or USDT? Why launch my own stablecoin?
Yeah. I think if you're going to move on chain, so if you're going to be using, then obviously the default would just be, hey, like let's just use USDC or USDT. These are obviously amazing products, amazing businesses. The network's effects are incredible. I think these days, though, everyone wants the treasury revenue, right? I mean, notoriously, right, Circle and Tether typically are not sharing revenue or with very few entities. And so it's just a wide open revenue stream there, basically close to the risk-free rate there. So as you get at scale, that's just a revenue stream that's very hard to ignore. I think that's the one that's most talked about. There are some others, though. One would be sort of the control or customization around the stablecoins. If you think about using like a USDC or USDT, you're very far removed from the issuer. It's very hard to do customization. So let's say you want to move this stablecoin to like a new blockchain, like a more bleeding edge chain, or you want to do something that's more allow list focused or these kind of like other tweaks. I'm seeing more and more of these cases that are really more, you can really do custom fit stablecoins per use cases. There's a mental model, kind of like jobs to be done for stablecoins beyond just treasury revenue. And of course, branding, right? In the future, I think brand is something that's a little bit of more optionality for now. Like I think a lot of these companies haven't really explored the full weight of what could be done with their own brand, but at least it gets things started. And I think in the future, you'll see a move more from closed loop stablecoins to open. So that's the way I really think about it, is sort of like treasury revenue, it's kind of customization, and then branding, which really allows you to do more interesting things with your product experience that you could do with a traditional stablecoin, where in the wider world, like users trust these major fintechs or technology brands more than they would trust these stablecoins today. It makes more sense to build your product experience around your own than someone else.
Yeah, I totally agree. I actually I had this conversation with one of my colleagues about a year and a half ago, and I was and still am convinced that branded stablecoins are going to be a huge social signaling mechanism in the future. The example I use is every Taylor Swift fan holding their dollars in Swift bucks is a huge like data point for protocols, for celebrities, for projects, and a really, really interesting actually incentive mechanism or opportunity for incentive mechanisms down the road, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah. I think, one way to think about it is like if I'm going to, like as a user, if I'm going to hold my value in some currency, I'd prefer to hold it in some community that I'm aligned with and have some either governance of or at least, shared values with, as opposed to just some like general, something far away. So if you think about like a creator, I think even things like movements, just communities, all these kind of things, I think in the future, you'll see a lot more branded currencies. I think we're pretty early at this point. We're more in the phase of kind of like commercialization around revenue share and customization. I think over time, I think there's some narrative where people are starting to argue against branded stables. I think it's an interesting argument, kind of like more reconsolidation. But I actually think we're quite early and we haven't even seen really the explosion of basically community-based currencies yet.
Agreed. There's literally, like, assuming they're interoperable, there's literally zero cost for me to vote with my dollars. I mean, it's an old saying, right? But it's a completely new application of that idea. And I think it's going to be super weird, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun when it hits. Cool. The other thing that I sort of noticed doing my background research is you guys have partnered with a ton of projects. I think you support 22 chains now. Recent announcements with Canton, Tempo, Algorand, Frax. Wondering if you can speak to sort of like the growth over the past year, projects, chains, partners choosing to deploy their stables on Brale. How do you think about your growth strategy in the next 12 months based on what you guys have done over the last year or two?
Yeah. I think it's a really interesting time right now, sort of post Genius and kind of just with the general climate of stablecoins. A lot of what we're thinking about with the business is basically increasing optionality and just making stablecoins usable everywhere, both in the on-chain world and the off-chain world. So on the on-chain side, we've continued to add more and more blockchains. I think especially taking positions early on networks that we think are unique. I would call out things like Canton with privacy as examples of that. I think things like Radius, which is a wonderful team, but also kind of high TPS design. These are like unique chains. So I think we're taking a view on enabling use cases with stablecoins. And so we're trying to be, the first or at least one of the first issuers to a lot of these chains. And I think on the banking side, really the same thing, trying to add as many methods, as many partners, trying to make it as easy as possible. So again, I'd call out again things like the virtual account automations, things like debits. We've got a whole bunch of other things. We're working a lot on consumer-based on-ramps as well. I think that's an area we're really excited about this year. If you look at traditional stablecoin on-ramps for consumers, they've been quite expensive, or at least in our view. And I think some of the user experience there hasn't been great. And so, we'll have a product line coming later in the year. But I think ultimately, right, the kind of whole model here is that we're building as low level as possible for Brale, both on the on-chain side and the off-chain side, right? Direct banking relationships, or billing direct to the chain. We have our own wallet infrastructure, all this sort of pieces, which is it's investment. But I think the long-term view is that this allows us to have the best control over the user experience. And this allows us to offer these products, really at the best rates possible for the market. And so we're trying to position here really long term and continue to just build out more and more nodes in terms of on chain and off chain, trying to make branded stable coins as easy to use as possible.
For sure. I think the unsexy hands in the mud stuff that doesn't scale, like building those on ramps one at a time, providing those integrations are they're so high value, and it's the only way that we actually make that last mile connection between the user and the Web3 infrastructure that stablecoins actually run on. And until very recently, I think our industry has been lacking in that. Right. It's nice to see projects that are taking on that huge job and making it happen. Yeah. Cool. I know we've touched on it a couple of times. You've mentioned automations. Can you give just because I'm pretty blown away by these. Can you give a walkthrough of the automation process, what it means and what it unlocks for somebody using stablecoins on Brale?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you think about any application or fintech, right, or all these kind of business models, right? I mean, what we typically heard from people is that, of course, like they want to move to stablecoins for ledgering, instant settlement, all that stuff, right? But to start, right, they're in a fiat-based world, and so we're often thinking about just what's the easiest possible way to on ramp, basically what you were just talking about a second ago. And so automations are unique virtual accounts that can be presented to like basically one per user that immediately mint a branded stablecoin to an end wallet. And so this is so powerful because these are really unique, permanent instructions that can be presented to your user that they can push funds into at any time and immediately convert that into a branded stablecoin. And so this really becomes like the liquidity sink or just the on-ramp method. And by the way, the virtual accounts as well, the automations feature, I think the pricing that we have is really incredible in the market as well. And so it just continues to support this. So we're here to, for hundreds of thousands, millions, right, of virtual accounts to get stable coins up and running in your application.
Nice. Yeah. And those are like the automations instantly mints the stable coins. And you have another feature called instant treasury that allows any issuer of a stable coin to automatically start generating the same yield that a non-yield bearing stable coin would be keeping as their margin base.
Yeah, I'm really excited about instant treasury. This is one of the products that I think looking later in the year we're most bullish on. I think this is actually a great example of, I think the future would look like here is like really first class on ramps and then kind of supercharged with stablecoin issuance, right? And so in the case of something like automations, we're providing those ramps ourselves. In the case of instant treasury, we've been working with CoinFlow for a very long time. I mean, for years at this point, they have a really excellent product. So they essentially allow merchants to accept payment immediately. Essentially, it's immediate settlement. A user swipes a card, right, saying on an e-commerce platform or something like that. The merchant traditionally would receive USDC immediately, which is an incredible value, right? 24/7, kind of weekend settlement. So the combination of CoinFlow and Brale, you can now settle immediately in your own stablecoin, immediately start capturing treasury revenue, and there's no additional effort really for developers. Essentially, it just becomes like a flag there. And so I think this is a really compelling kind of combo of products there that's been positioned together. And I think a good example of how, if done in the right way, using your own stablecoin is really no additional effort. You almost just get it for free and can start, generating the benefits of, in some cases, super ramps that you'd already be using.
Yeah, that's very cool. The individual products are very interesting, but put together as a suite, you can imagine some really value additive services that you can start providing to issuers and users of the stablecoins.
Yeah, I think especially for things like marketplaces, it just allows them to think a bit differently. It allows them to start incentivizing keeping funds on platform, opening things up with what traditionally would have been earn programs or loyalty programs. And I just see more and more of this again. I think the last 2 years has been very payments focused, will obviously continue to grow. But I think where we're most excited really right now is more for these, I think especially marketplace models, kind of game models and chance as more of these come online and they just kind of default into their own stablecoin.
Yeah, that makes sense. On that note, and zooming out a little bit, how do you think about there's sort of this tension between the idea that, money when it's working properly should be almost an abstract layer that you don't really have to think about. It just works behind the scenes, right? But on the other hand, there's so much in terms of new incentives and new revenue generation streams that things like branded stablecoins bring to the table that really did not exist before. What do you think about the tension going into the future between increased fragmentation and solving for that and confusion in the marketplace with a huge number of stablecoins, assuming every network wants to keep their value on their network, right? But the user also wants to make sure that money just works wherever it goes, right? So there's a bit of a tension there. How do you think about threading the needle, and what does the end state look like over the next 3 or 4 years in the stablecoin industry? Does it collapse to one or two big players? Is there this Cambrian explosion of stablecoins and we sort of reconceptualize the value or the way we think of money and where it sits into more platform-based ecosystems? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think this is a really good question. And I think one of the main objections or kind of wonderings that comes up with branded stablecoins, I think there's basically two high level possibilities. I think in the near term, we will continue to see an explosion of branded stables. And I mean, this just we can see the front lines here, so it just will happen. It's more like in the long term, I think there's two possibilities. One is that you get a reconsolidation back into more sort of consortium stables. I think, the days everyone is going to be looking for revenue share. So I think the days of kind of just, USDC, USDT, I think due to first mover, because they're so on chain, and they consolidate liquidity with other pairs, they continue to kind of win that side. But I think as far as everything else, you either have a rebundling back into consortium stables, which, kind of solve your the liquidity fragmentation, but still share revenue, or you get more of the long tail of branded stables with an interop solution. Obviously, I think we're biased. I think what will probably happen is the second view. The main thing we need is strong interop. I think from a Brale level basis, obviously we already have that ourselves with all of our own stable coins. I think what we're missing is more your, I'll call it CCTP type equivalent among all stablecoins, or so all regulated stablecoins or some kind of clearinghouse type mechanism. I think with that, you can start to really support the long tail where all of these stable coins are customized for their use case. Again, like we talked about earlier, you have ideological alignment with your community, but you're on a standard enough where you can essentially treat it essentially like commercial bank deposits, right? But yeah, I think that will be one of the biggest pieces is if you read the biggest open questions going forward for basically branded issuers is racing towards interop. And then the kind of other side of the market will focus on this consortium approach. Again, I do really love the products as well, like USDG. I think they just leave a little bit behind in terms of what can be done. There's obviously trade-offs there. I think ultimately you probably see some of both.
Yeah, definitely. I think that makes sense. Cool. One of the other things that I love that you guys do is the Day Zero conferences. Very community focused, great sort of show and tell platform, both for the Brale team. The last one that I joined, Ben actually demonstrated automations for the first time. And I understood 65% of it, but then when I researched a bit more, I actually grokked it and I was like, this is really interesting. But, talk to me a little bit about that approach and the focus on community, because it's a shifting landscape in crypto generally right now, but you guys seem to be really focusing deeply, engaging with the developers, building in the open. And yeah, talk to me about how that was baked into the, the philosophy behind how you're building. And if you've been to any of these and seen something really interesting that you'd call out.
Yeah, I really like Day Zero. It's not something that I've seen done in other roles quite a bit in the past. I think Ben previously ran a virtual conference series called DeFi Summer and a lot of fintech leaders. And I think the piece there that was more unique is it was really product based. It was like this very product based virtual conference with like in-depth demos. And to your point, they do get like very detailed, but you can really see like some of the bleeding edge stuff that people are building. And I think it's a lot more substantive. There's literally no presentations. It's like pretty much all product demos. I think for us, it's been so powerful as a way to get early feedback and really just, build in public, build alongside a lot of these, a lot of these companies. It's the other thing is like we're all, as the space is so early, a lot of these products, right, that are built on top of Brale as well are evolving like in real time. And so just the feedback loop, the ability to almost build a shared roadmap really with a whole set of different customers has been really powerful. And honestly, it's just fun. Like it's just fun to see how fast everyone is building the new stuff that's coming out. And I think also the ability just to do that all virtually, kind of we've got it now into like a really nice repeat template that I think where we can kind of show some new stuff we're building, but there's most of it's kind of the community showing new stuff as well. And I think we've gotten really great feedback around it.
Yeah, and I think you attract and you retain great developers when there's a sense of reciprocity in the building process, right? Yeah, that's what struck me in the last one that I went to. Cool, awesome. Well, I think we're almost at time, but next 12 months, what are you guys cooking?
Yeah, I think we'll see kind of just faster growth and explosion. On what I mentioned earlier, it'll be again continued placement on a lot more blockchains. I think we're very focused on on ramps, so we'll see even more improvements around kind of the supercharged automations feature. We'll see a lot more in terms of consumer ramps as well. I think for Brale historically it started with more of a business focus, but as all these use cases come online, they're seeing more and more demand for consumer cases, really trying to get these tools literally as close to free as possible, as scalable as possible. And I think this is just a really exciting time for stables. We're going to see some major announcements this year. We already have, but I think we'll start to see again towards branded, even more towards branded stables, even things that are broader away from payments. I think we'll start to see branded stables more as just, the operating system for companies more broadly. And if we can provide some tooling that helps with that, alongside other companies, I think it'll be a great year.
Yeah, definitely. And the amount of money that's sitting on platforms right now, it seems like an absolute no-brainer. Read an article a while ago said if Starbucks was a bank, the gift cards revenue from their gift cards that were outstanding would be something like the 12th biggest bank or something along those lines in the US. Like it's absolutely massive. So that seems like it'd be a huge unlock. Awesome. Well, thank you for joining, Chase. If people want to learn more, get involved, where should they go? We'll put the show notes or the links in the show notes too.
Yeah. So, on our website, Brale.xyz, obviously on Twitter, Brale_XYZ, and then got, personal profile as well on Twitter and LinkedIn. I would say overall Twitter is probably X is the best way to find us.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thanks again for joining. Good luck with the cold. Hopefully it's not too much longer. Awesome. Enjoy the week, guys. Have a good one. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks.